Growing up in Dalton when I did in the 50s, I always felt as though I had a huge advantage. Number one, I grew up on a street called Oak Street Extension, which is probably the most famous street for athletes in the town of Dalton, without a doubt. And by growing up there and being able to participate right after World War II, I mean, everything was wide open. The town was great. You didn't have to worry about anything. You'd go morning till night to the park and games, and it was just fantastic. The way to grow up then was superb. That's all I can tell you. Dalton meant a lot to me, still does for that purpose. But growing up and playing in all those sports back in the 50s and then into the 60s at Wacona, and being a first class, I was in that first class to go out of Wacona too. I think the grandchildren already got a bit of that today. They didn't realize my background as much. I mean, you don't talk about that. You don't do, and I heard them talking, coming over here and saying, "Wow, Grandpa, I didn't realize what you did, what you were involved with," And my comments, especially Chloe, was coming through. Maybe someday you'll be a recipient of this. It'll be for you. When I was a senior in '62, Mark Belcher was a senior at Pittsville High School. And the basketball team that we had in '62 was outstanding. In fact, we finished second only to Pittsfield in the Northern Division. And Pittsfield had Belcher. But I always tell the story, we had 5 better players than they had 5, but we didn't have a Mark Belcher.
Right. Yeah,
He's outstanding. He's probably the best basketball player this area has ever seen, in my opinion. He ended up being a baseball all-pro player and whatnot, but still, basketball was his sport when he was here. It wasn't baseball. Well, he took that team all the way to the New England Championships against a team from Connecticut and scored 32 points in the final game, Belcher.
Wow.
And he's a tremendous basketball player. I just wish he didn't come through the same year that I was here. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
People talk about that and I say, well, hey, Wacona had a heck of a team then. Yeah. I always said it was the start that I got on Oak Street Extension. Now that sounds corny, but I was a park leader on Oak Street Extension. There was only one other kid that was older than me, and it was Mike Casey, who had the collegiate team.
Yes.
And but it was loaded with athletes. Yep. And we had pickup games when we weren't at the park, and I ended up being sort of a park leader. So I love recreation, and I love that part of it given to the kids. You know what I mean? I had so many stories I could tell you about the kids on that street. It's just amazing to me. But that has an advantage that I ended up with. That was a veterans, by the way. World War II veterans. Those houses were all for the veterans on Oak Street Extension. Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah, we were the first house on the left. We were the first people to move in there. There wasn't a tree on that street.
Wow.
Hot in the summertime. It was terrible. But what athletes on that street? I mean, the Reardons and the Zinks and the Callahans and Caseys, and we had them all. Boog Powell started there. Boog lived right next door to me.
I can envision it now and see the yards and see it in the lots and throwing and then hiking on down to Pine Grove Park and saying, let's go, here we go.
And we weren't at Pine Grove Park, we had pickup games. Sandy and I were in Hawaii on vacation, and there was a Jeep, came around the corner on about 2 wheels and hollers, "Boys Club." Yeah, it was one of the Howe kids from Pittsfield. So no matter where you go, you touch so many lives. I had that same thing happen here today.
Wow.
Same thing happened today. The individual came to me and said, "Do you remember this?" And half the time you don't remember. You try to be very polite and say, yeah. But it's hard because at that time in Pittsfield, the membership was 5,000.
It was the largest in the country, is that correct?
It was the largest single unit under one roof. That means under one roof in the country.
Yep.
And, so those kids are everywhere. And in Dalton, the same thing. In the years I spent here, that place was jam-packed when I left here. Yep. And I left here for a chance to grow, and I went with Jim Mooney, and I never looked back. I did what I wanted to do, and retired that way. And
it's beautiful to walk into that building still and to see that big painting.
Big painting up there. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Back to high school days, you had a teammate, Mark Pupor.
Yeah, I had a team.
How special was that relationship? And because you went through football, basketball, and baseball together.
Yeah.
How special was that? And how special was he?
He was a very special player, maybe one of the best, obviously one of the best players that ever came out of a 3-sport athlete out of Wacona. But he was He was a very good student. He was a very well-liked. He treated everybody nicely. He was just a great, and to be on a team with him was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I had a little thing happen just the other day where Jeannie came over to me, his wife, and said to me, I'd like to get a picture of Mark throwing the first pitch at Wacona. And I said, do you really want that picture? And she said, oh yeah, I'd like that. I said, because the kid from Drury hit it for a home run. Oh. Do you know that story? The first pitch at Wacona, the first pitch on that new field, Eddie Knoll hit it out. Right out of the park. Yeah. I said, I got this article. I told her what happened and all that, but I said, I want you to read just down at the next column down. I drove in both runs and won the game. The first game at Wacona.
Really?
I didn't even know that. The article, I mean, you put that stuff away for 50 years. I didn't remember that I drove in those 2 runs and we won the game. So Mark's home run didn't go to naught. We won.
Just add it to the drama.
Just added to it, sure. Yeah, that's a true story. I mean, I didn't really realize it again. I realized a lot. A person talked to me today, here, I'm not mentioning names, but talked to me about the influence I had on his life. I never knew that. I mean, I didn't really think that way, you know? We were very close all the way through. We won many all-tournament teams, all-star teams, travel all over the place together. We went through it together. I always say we went through it together. We were in more locker rooms and more situations than most kids dream of. We were everywhere.
Great story.
But it was like Dalton. If you went to Dalton, and then you had to get Crozier and Pupor.
Yeah,
we want them. You know? Yeah, that's the way it was. Yeah.
Historic athlete, Craig Crozier, and more importantly, as he goes through and we remember these stories, he created history here in town and out in Pittsfield. We're forever in town for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Great stuff.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, first of all, I started teaching in 1972, and I told Coach O'Connor, who was the AD, I said, I'd like to do baseball someday. You know, that was always my passion. Football is now, but baseball was my passion. And I always, I've always thought of the future of teaching and coaching baseball. And there were no jobs open then, so in '75, when they opened up softball, it was the first year that they had varsity sports for girls. And nobody knew what was going to happen because it was all new. For example, when we did finally put a program together, we had no uniforms, we just had hats. Coach Dowling, she was our first catcher. And just to give you an idea, not to pick on Coach Dowling, but she was our first catcher. She was willing to do it. But she was about 5 foot tall, and we had, all the equipment we had was men's equipment.
Oh.
So when she had her equipment on, the chest protector went all the way to the ground.
I can see it.
The shin guards, the kneecaps to the shin guards were up like on her thigh. And she had a big oversized mask. The only good thing is she talked a lot and we really couldn't hear her because she had so much equipment on.
I love it. I love it.
So it really was, I didn't know what to expect. I have to admit, we were all pretty much chauvinists back then.
Yeah.
I had very little interest at first when Coach said, well, if you do softball, then when a baseball job comes up, I promise you that, I'll consider you. He gave me a week to think about it, and finally I said, and my wife was very supportive, and she said, well, go ahead and try it. And I have to admit, people said, wow, you're going to coach girls softball. The thing that got me the most, and it was I would say the first couple of days that we practiced, was the enthusiasm that the girls had. And I would go in, of course we're in the gym because it was in the winter or late spring. And we would go into the gym and I would watch the boys practice and the enthusiasm wasn't there. You play.
It's old hat.
Yeah, it's old hat. Yeah. But to these girls, it was the first time that most of them had any organized coaching. They were so excited about the program and willing to work hard that it really made it easier for me because I had that spirit and, I was kind of a wacko coach and they seemed to, really appreciate that. And so the harder I worked, the harder they did. And it took a while to get off the ground, but, I would just say their dedication was the key thing. The sport is pretty much the same except for the difference in pitching.
Sure.
So I felt very comfortable with that. But, again, they had an awful lot to learn because they had never had any formal, training. There were no youth leagues.
No, I was just going to ask that.
No.
No youth leagues.
No. Most of the kids that I got, that was the first time they played any organized softball. So you talk about starting from scratch.
Yeah.
The big difference was certainly, females as compared to males, and it took me a while to deal with that because obviously there are differences. And I tried to coach it in the beginning as I would coach boys.
Sure.
And we kind of met halfway. I used to say, you're not going to throw like girls. And they used to hate to hear that initially. But as time went on, and you taught them why they couldn't throw. First of all, it was an issue of strength because they hadn't thrown for many years. So once we kind of got over I'm gonna be a tough coach. I'm gonna be firm, but I'm also gonna be supportive. But it was difficult that I would say certainly the first couple of years I had to make adjustments to the fact that, they're girls and they're not boys and there is a difference. But at the same time, again, their enthusiasm was what I think carried us through. We didn't know what kind of success we'd have early, but I honestly think, and I knew of some of the coaches in the league, and I have to admit, I don't think they took it as seriously as I did. I think they still thought, well, it's a bunch of girls, we'll put a program together for them. We didn't have that approach. And so, pretty quickly we saw, great improvement. Kids, again, it comes back to, working hard. That's the difference. If the kids don't put the time and effort into it, then, it's not going to work. So we just built upon that and Wacona teams, including, when Joanne took over for me and when Kenny took over, and of course Dustin, what a great job he's doing. It's based on, I think our program's based on fundamentals, which sounds obvious, but as you know as a football coach, that's so key. Certainly teamwork, putting the team first and you second, and just having a lot of good athletes and good kids over the years just helped us to build it to what it is today. And today, I have to say it, I teased Dustin, they got 4 or 5 coaches and it was pretty much Boog and I, and he was, well, as you know, Coach Powell was not just a great guy, but he was a great coach. He studied all the different sports, and he was a great supporter of, he mostly coached during the tournaments, because he had the JV program, or when I got kicked out of games, he'd have to come up to the varsity.
No.
I have to say one time, we were playing up in Drury, and I got kicked out. I'm not proud of that, but I kicked the ball bag and I didn't know it was open. So the balls just went flying, and umpire even apologized. He goes, well, I got to throw you out for that. So poor Boog had to come from the JV field, which was way down beyond right field.
Yeah.
And he's pulling his pants up, and he's coming up, and finally gets up there, he looks at him and goes, what the hell do you do now, Cookie? Sounds like Boog, right?
Yeah, it does. It was perfect.
But he was, he knew the game real well, and he was very supportive, and he had a lot to do with our success.
Yeah.
Well, it is a good feeling. I will say today that there's a lot better coaching. Overall, the players are a lot better. There's a lot more training. A lot of the pitchers will start, individual training at age 8, that type of thing. So that makes a big difference. But I am proud of the program. Dustin's just done and his staff have done an unbelievable job. So I really believe that, it is the best program in Berkshire County since 1975, and I think it'll continue to be that way for a long time. So,
Hall of Famer Mike Cooney, founder of Wacona Softball, and plain and simple, one of the best coaches and teachers out there. Appreciate it.
thanks, Coach.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
Nice job.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
My older brother, who's just out there, he came up with a little cross-country course right in the Appalachian Trail, like right near my house. And so it was like an 8/10 of a mile thing. So we kind of would race each other. And I could kind of beat my older brothers, but I kind of knew I could run as a kid. But gym teacher would say, oh, you're so shy in class, but in gym, you're turned into an animal. And that's kind of how I was. I just kind of was I don't know, I just like a natural type of, but real shy kind of. I was gonna train on, then I thought how hard it was. I'm I'm not gonna go out for the team. And it was like 2 weeks in I ran in basketball shoes or whatever, and it was hard. I mean, the first year I just felt like it. It was, I think, the first team that Lakota ever had for girls, and we trained with guys. And, I mean, it was hard. Every night I'd go home, sometimes never even, like I ate dinner and would go to bed. And I'm like, this is so hard. I'm like, why am I doing this to my poor body? But I think after like the third or fourth race, I actually won a race, but it seemed like a marathon to even do the 2.5 mile course. Once I joined the team, like we trained the guys and the girls together, so I had a great time. Like we literally, we'd be picking apples, we'd be throwing mud, we ran on the Appalachian Trail, and sometimes they even ran to McDonald's. We'd be running back, but it was like Al Devereaux. His daughter was on our team, and she was 2 years older. But it was just like the rapport. But Al Devereaux, he was instrumental because he kept. I ran hard, but I wouldn't train all year round until I think going into my junior year. He kept trying to get me to go to this Green Mountain running camp. And I'm thinking, who wants to go to camp? You're going to run 2 or 3 times a day? I thought it was hard. And so I finally went, and I kind of motivated me to train year round because we met like Greta Waits and some Olympics, and Olympic coaches and Olympic athletes. So I came back kind of motivated, and so I ran really well like my junior year.
What an experience.
Running for me is like a balance. It kind of calms you down, but it gives you energy. So for me, it's like therapy, really. And it kind of like sports carries over into your personal life. Like Al Devereaux, like no one in my family had ever gone to college. And so I didn't even consider college. In my junior year, I came in like 5th in the state in the mile. And he's like, people were kind of about scholarships, but he had never had someone run in college. And he's like, he said, I don't want you to go to Division I school and quit, make it like your job. So he's like, just promise you never quit. He took days off from his own work as a gym teacher and drove me to all the colleges himself. And so he inspired me to go to college because I never would have. So it was kind of him. Like he was almost like a second father because he would, even though we didn't have indoor track, like he would come to the high school and he would just check in with me because you couldn't really coach him, but he would even check, like, who are you dating that guy or going out? And he was like a second father, really. They go, oh, here comes your coach. But he was nice, like, and he kind of inspired me personally, like, and everything. And so I, have like a master's degree and I'm a nurse practitioner. So, I mean, it's probably like, you kind of get into goal-oriented mode, so you kind of, it carries over in your own life, so.
Well, I'll tell you what, you were inspirational here. And still, it's so awesome to have you here. It's so awesome that now you will be here forever.
Yeah.
And little girls and little people will walk into that room and see your story. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And congratulations to the Hall of Fame. Still running into the record books. Diane Tedford.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's great.
Thanks.
That's cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I give a lot of the credit that I had in baseball to my soccer playing and basketball. I mean, just staying agile on my feet and always in shape to be able to make the quick move. I think that definitely translated over into being prepared for baseball. I was a good ball player, but I didn't really believe in myself that I would be good enough to go to a Division I baseball program or even let alone to get to the big leagues. But when I was a young kid, I looked up to 2 guys local here in town, and that was Jeff Reardon and Turk Wendell. Those were the 2 examples that any of us had to look up to, right? So they impacted me in such a huge degree when I was a young kid because I got a chance to meet Jeff Reardon, and that gave me a vision to build something for myself. I knew I wanted to be a baseball player after I saw how people responded to a Jeff Reardon, and then Turk Wendell, just a great example, great guy, and I got a chance to meet him when I was in high school, and we all know Turk. He's just such a great dude, great example. Who wouldn't want to be a baseball player if everyone's like Turk, right?
Right.
So those 2 guys, I mean, those were my inspirations. My grandfather really had a lot to do with my work ethic. That's my mom's father, and they owned a dairy farm, so it was always farming. So in the summer, we baled hay. So it was like I had to go to work, and those long days taught me, kind of having a little bit of longevity in baseball and just the value of seeing a long, full day's work And while some of my friends weren't out working, I was working during those days and learning the value of a long work day. And I think that translated over down the road in the future for my baseball career. I like to give it credit for it, you know. But my grandfather was really a guy that, you know, he's just a phenomenal guy and taught me a lot about good work ethic as a young kid. At the time when Clemson had seen me and saw me for the first time, I was going to North Adams State College, which is now MCLA, and no colleges were very interested in me. And how I ended up at Clemson, I went to Oklahoma, played in an AAU baseball tournament in August going into my freshman year of college. So it was late, and I went to Oklahoma thanks to Franny Reardon, who got me into a top 96 baseball program. And from that program, I was asked to go represent New England in Oklahoma. So I did. I hopped on a flight, and I knew it was my last chance, really, to get seen.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, it was like, man, maybe somebody can see me on this road trip, and maybe I do something good, and you know, where I get noticed. And that's exactly what happened. I went out there, my very first day, I threw a no-hitter. Clemson was there. Clemson saw me just pitch one time, and I picked a really good time, and you know, God had His hand in that the whole time. And I didn't throw too many no-hitters in my life, but the couple that I did throw, it was important times in which I did throw them.
That's cool. That's a great story.
Yeah, that's how I ended up at Clemson. It was a very surreal feeling for a young rookie, you know, and to be with the Boston Red Sox, a team that we all grew up loving, and to be at Yankee Stadium, which is where I debuted. So the whole thing was as a 25-year-old guy, when it happened to me getting to the big leagues, I was really in awe. I couldn't believe that this is where I was really at. Right. And I found myself playing with guys that I was really big fans of. Sure. You know, Pedro Martinez, Manny Ramirez, and the list goes on. The Red Sox had a lot of great players, but it was just a really surreal feeling being from a town of Windsor, right up here in Windsor, and to blink your eyes and to be there. It really meant a lot to me, but I realize now that it meant more to others, I think. Setting that example, I was out there on the treadmill doing it, but I realize now that my career was over, the amount of the different folks that I was able to inspire and the hearts that I was able to touch.
But good stuff.
Yeah.
Matt, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks
for sharing your story.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hall of Famer, Matt White.
Thank you. Thank you, brother.
Awesome.
Take care, okay?
Always good to see you. Awesome.
I was like Happy Gilmore, you know? I was like a swimmer, but I would always have like my football jersey on when I go there, and just people look at me all weird, and I'm got my headphones on, I'm getting fired up, and they're like, what's wrong with this guy? And, you know, I'm like, I'm gonna kill you. I had two older brothers, Mark and Craig, and we're like 2, 4, 6, and the beatings would commence on a regular basis. I had to scramble for food because I would sit we had a bench, so I'd sit in the middle, and Craig would eat all my food. If you know Craig, he's definitely eating my food. So, I mean, it was war. And then the parents, you know, like one year for an Easter gift, we got boxing gloves, you know, so that's just. It was scrapping. Dad was tough. He's not a huggy, kissy guy. But he was tough, and he was very straightforward. And one thing he told me, which really made me mad, was he's like, Eric, no matter how good you think you are, there's always somebody out there that's better. And it made me mad. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to prove him wrong. I never did quite but it didn't break a world record. But, you know, that was something that just kind of stuck with me, that, you know, no matter how good you think, I think he was trying to knock me down a little bit too, but very level. And if you know my dad, that's Dad, you know, and you know my dad very well, you know. It's kind of like you don't know any different, you know. We grew up swimming in that pool, and, you know, it's 20 yards, where an Olympic-sized pool is 50 meters. Yeah. So it's 3 of those pools in a line. Yeah. But you know what? Our turns were really good. You know, so I swear, you know, I always tell people, I wasn't a very good swimmer, but I could start and I could turn better than anybody else. And so and your 2 fastest points in a swimming race are your start and your turn. Yep. If you think about it.
It is.
So you don't have to be a good swimmer to be a fast swimmer.
No.
So I'm at my first NC2A meet as a freshman, right? And I swim my first event, And I just go out and I just die like a rock. I didn't score, which was very disappointing. And then that night, we had the guy who won the 50 free.
Yeah.
They took him off the relay, the short relay, and put me on and made me the anchor leg. And I'm like, Pete, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? He's like, Mac, I don't care what you do as long as you win.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So
Made it simple.
so we went out, we won that, broke an NCAA record, touched out the guy who was second, and he was their anchor leg for the other team, and it was beat him by 4/100ths of a second. I mean, you can't even count 4/100ths of a second, but that was so. Right there, he's like, I don't care what you do, just win. And so I was like, all right, I got it. But he gave me an opportunity after I screwed up that first event, and then came
And they
back.
made it simple for you.
And
That's it.
then I just kind of use that mentality the rest of the time. And what I always tell people is you always learn something from every coach that you've had growing up, whether it's good or bad. If you have a bad coach, take something from it and learn it so you don't do those things. If you have great coaches, take it. I tell them I'm not a good coach. I just had a lot of good coaches and I steal their ideas and now they think they're mine. I'm just using other people's ideas on how to get to things. But the biggest thing is, as you're obviously a great coach, is connecting with your athletes. You get on that level with those kids and they're kids. I mean, they're 24-year-old adults I was coaching, but you get on that level where they believe in what you're doing and they trust what you're doing. And you get that, you're gonna see them flourish. Same thing. You're working with your high school kids. There's so many different ways to coach football, and you get them fired up, and they're gonna run through a wall for you.
Yep.
It's about people relationships, and again, getting these kids to see the big picture. Going back from college now, coming back and as an athletic director, I say I coach coaches. And, again, trying to just help them get their kids to be better. Because, it's not about the wins and losses, even though I love to win, you love to win.
Right.
But you get these kids on page, the wins will come. You get them doing the things right, things will come. So it's pretty cool.
Eric Macquan, Hall of Famer, great friend. Appreciate your time today, and it's so cool to have you back.
Yeah,
in
it's
town.
good to be around, man. Love you, brother. It's always been good. We hung out a lot, man, growing up, all the time, and even after school, we still stay together.
All
So
those together.
appreciate it, man, hanging out.
Awesome.
Good seeing you, brother.
Good seeing you.
Thanks.
Thank you.